This GeekWire podcast is brought to you by BECU. Stay tuned to the break as Brian Westbrook interviews BECU's Stacy Black about minimizing the impact of uncertain times on your financial health. For more money hacks, check out geekwire.com/BECU. Welcome to GeekWire. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop. Before we jump in, a quick reminder, it's your last chance to register to join us at GeekWire's Microsoft at 50 event. That's coming up next Thursday, March 20th at Town Hall, Seattle. You can go to geekwire.com/events or look for the link in the show notes to sign up to join us. Coming up later, Microsoft brings its Copilot AI technology to gaming, but can the company prove that this is more than Xbox meets Clippy? We'll consider that question in the final segment. But first, there was some big news this week in real estate technology. Rocket Companies, the Detroit-based mortgage, real estate, and personal finance platform, announced that it's acquiring Redfin, the Seattle-based tech-powered real estate company founded more than 2 decades ago that has been a longtime disruptor in the world of buying and selling homes. The deal is valued at $1.75 billion. I spoke about Rocket's acquisition of Redfin with Stephanie Reed-Simons, Senior Vice President at realestatenews.com, who oversees the news team there, and Tim Ellis, a former Redfin market analyst who's a blogger and podcaster and a veteran of Seattle startups including Porch, Moz, and Glowforge, in addition to Redfin. Steph and Tim, it's great to have you both on the show.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
Thanks, Todd.
Steph, let's start with you. Big picture, what do you make of this deal?
Well, it's funny. We had recently seen and also amplified the story that our friends at GeekWire, you all had written about the potential acquisition of Redfin by Zillow, which has been a long-running source of speculation in the industry that Zillow would swallow up its Seattle neighbor. I know Zillow lives in the cloud, but Redfin is its Seattle neighbor, and that it would swallow it up, and that would be that for Redfin. But we were surprised, I think, at this outcome. Wasn't necessarily the deal we were expecting, although not surprised that a deal took place. I think it's kind of widely known and thought in the industry that Redfin has a terrific website and a model that is getting sharper and sharper with the flexibility that they've added for agents to make money in different ways than just that low cost commission model. So we knew Redfin was making moves from the brokerage side. It just didn't seem to be happening maybe as quickly as they would have hoped. And so, yes, not surprised at the deal, a little surprised at this deal. But when you look at it, even for a second, it makes so much sense. And it suddenly adds a new dimension to conversation Zillow has been having for a while about a super app, which is an end-to-end experience for home buyers and sellers that makes it easy for them to move through the process and not have this patchwork of unfortunate connections that don't always connect, right? You have to get a mortgage. You have to find the place, find the agent, make sure that you can afford the place you love, make sure that that you can close the deal and do the deal, maybe sell a house you already own. That's all complicated, hard, emotional. Zillow's vision for a long time since, by the way, I should say, I used to work at Zillow until about 3-4 years ago. And I'm traveling, so you may hear a few airport announcements as well.
All good stuff. All part of the environment. That's good.
So Zillow's vision for a long time has been to create a seamless end-to-end experience for home buyers and sellers. And that's been a vision adopted by others. Rocket, back when I was still at Zillow, was on their radar for sure as a competitor that they needed to pay significant attention to. Zillow has its own mortgage business, which has been thriving. It's important to Zillow to have this. And now that Redfin and Rocket had united, there's some concerns and fears in the industry that this could create a situation where Rocket, through its scale, could potentially offer something that feels like even it's more discounted agents for folks because they can cook those costs into the overall cost of the mortgage and doing the entire deal. So there's a lot of ways that this acquisition can touch real estate, residential real estate business as we know it. And believe me, folks in the industry are looking really closely at how that might pan out. I haven't even mentioned the competition among home search sites. Zillow is obviously dominant by a lot, 200 million plus people go to Zillow every month. But Redfin is strong, and Redfin is a great customer experience. CoStar has been making moves. Those are the apartments.com folks. They are also the homes.com folks. They've been spending a lot of money. You might have seen their ads in the Super Bowl. They're making moves as well. Well, Rocket is also making Super Bowl size spends. And with all of that, I think creates an environment where we're going to see some even more heated competition than we've already been seeing, and the potential for some shifts in how people get paid doing home sales transactions. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That's perfect. That's a perfect backdrop. Tim, we should mention too, you've got a couple disclosures to make, just like Steph mentioned that she used to work at Zillow.
That's right. Yep. We got both sides of it here. Yeah. Because I was at Redfin for 2 separate tenures, totaling, I think it was around 7 years total. And I still own Redfin stock. So, the news this week certainly was nice in terms of the stock bump for me. That's for sure.
Right. And we should mention, too, so you were part of one of the rounds of layoffs that Redfin did
That's right.
a few years ago.
That's right. Yes. Redfin has now had, I believe, 6 rounds of layoffs since 2022. And they unfortunately eliminated my role in the second round. Otherwise, I'd probably still be there today, actually.
Yeah, I know you loved working there from my conversations with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was your take on this deal when you heard about it?
Well, it was actually really similar. I was definitely gotten to the point in the last year or two, with all these layoffs and kind of the struggles that Redfin has had in this sort of slow market for real estate sales in the high interest rate environment. And I put high in quotes there because it's not really high, but it's high relative to where they were for, a decade or so. It was pretty obvious, I think, that they were struggling, and an acquisition seemed increasingly likely. Rocket was not on my radar for, a possible acquirer, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, you were mentioning kind of Zillow's super app concept. And I know, Redfin, they've been kind of having that same concept for a long time as well. They called it the one-stop shop, but it was the same idea, and you could see that through their acquisitions. They acquired their own mortgage company a few years back. They acquired the rentals site. They had a title company, so they had been kind of moving in that same direction and had that same, goal as well. So Rocket wasn't really on my radar at all, but knowing now, that that's kind of something that they wanted to do as well, it makes perfect sense that they would, kind of match up together like this.
But the original reform that Redfin brought was a refund of fees to the home buyer, if I'm remembering correctly. That largely went away, as I understand it. And again, I'm a total interloper on this topic. I'm interested and follow it, but I'm not immersed in it like you two are. This is a story we've tracked for many years at GeekWire. Redfin has a very charismatic CEO, Glenn Kelman, who's really one of those people who can just deliver you a soundbite off the top of his head. But, this is a very interesting company that really tried to shake up the way real estate sales, home sales were done from the brokerage side. What does this mean for the Redfin story?
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but personally feel like it feels like certainly a major closure of at least a big chapter. I'm not going to say it's the end of the book, but, it definitely feels like they kind of had this mission and kind of over the years, the mission maybe kind of morphed and changed a little bit. And it's, I don't know. To me, it feels a little sad, right? Because, as having been there for a long time, I really bought into the mission and it felt like, Redfin could really accomplish it. They went public as opposed to being acquired, while they were still a private company, and it seemed like it was on a great trajectory there. Whereas, these last few years, it just, kind of almost feels like a little bit of not throwing in the towel, but grasping at straws and not really being able to find anything that really works. And so it feels like the Redfin perspective over the years shifted from we're going to revolutionize real estate by saving people money to we're going to revolutionize it by making it more streamlined, and simplifying the process and creating that one-stop shop. And whether that's equally as good for the consumer, I don't know, but that seems to certainly be really reinforced in this acquisition, is that strategy. It does feel like a little bit of a closure to the chapter, at least. And I don't know, we'll see where it goes. It's easy to imagine a scenario, I think, in a few years where Redfin barely exists outside of the website name, but the kind of all the stuff that was underneath it that kind of made it special to me is kind of not really there anymore. I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens.
Steph, I want to get your take on that, but first off, just for the record, I should say Glenn Kelman has been very clear. Redfin's going to continue to operate as its own brand, and at least in the short run. And I hear what you're saying, Tim, about the long-term implications. Who knows? But one of the things that he said was beneficial about this whole notion of going with Rocket is that they plan to keep Redfin intact. And he told the Puget Sound Business Journal, quote, "I think if we paired up with any other company, we would have been stripped for parts," contrasting that with what he says Rocket's going to do. Steph, where do you come in on all this?
I agree with all of that. I think the Redfin that you once knew, Tim, is probably something pretty hollowed out and may feel more hollowed out. Before I worked at Zillow, I worked at Amazon for about 8 years. And in that time, I worked for startups in Amazon, but towards the end of my time there, I worked at an Amazon acquisition called Woot.com.
Yeah. Oh, I loved Woot. Woot was one of my favorites.
So Woot still exists. Woot was acquired, and so Woot. And for those who don't know Woot, which is probably unlikely for a GeekWire podcast, but for those who don't know Woot, it's a extremely quirky deal-a-day website, or now it's many deals a day, where their brand is humor, and they essentially write jokes in the internet equivalent of sidewalk chalk, new jokes every day. And so my job coming over from the mothership of Amazon to the recently acquired Woot was to be the person who explained the jokes to lawyers and kind of helped keep the creative team from driving off a cliff. So it was a great time, but I will tell you in my time there, the folks who made Woot, the founder and some of the early employees ended up departing. And a lot of the feel of what it was went away. It became a little more Amazonian. Like I said, still exists, but when you buy things on Woot, you can get them with Amazon Prime. From a business standpoint, they've lasted a lot longer than anybody would have thought. And Amazon has a track record of making acquisitions where sometimes those acquisitions get absorbed or disappeared or whatever, but they also actually have acquisitions where those acquisitions survive as brands that are I would call it like maybe a light version of what they once were, and minus some of the culture that I know, or folks I knew who worked at Redfin. Culture was a big part of it. The mission was a big part of it. At Woot, the culture and mission became a diluted version of what attracted some of those delightful weirdos that I worked with. So I think Redfin's future is that it wouldn't surprise me if the name continues. The website and the experience of Redfin is terrific. It gives Rocket more shelf space. Why would they get rid of that, right? But it won't be the Redfin that you knew, certainly, and maybe consumers won't notice, but it won't be the Redfin that I remember competing with so eagerly back in the day. But I do think Rocket I agree with what Glenn said. I agree with this much more than comments he's made about things like drinking urine or whatever.
We were just talking about that before you joined.
That was on an earnings call.
Glenn, just to take this a step further, what is plan B if mortgage rates don't come down?
Great question. Plan B is drink our own urine or our competitor's blood, stay in the foxhole. I don't know if you remember, but the last earnings call ended with me singing a line from a Who song, Won't Get Fooled Again, where I had said we're not banking on low rates when other people had thought they might come down. I don't know. I'm just very, very seasoned in ups and downs in the housing market.
I think the conclusion we're coming to here is that obviously one of the biggest impacts of this deal is that Glenn Kelman will no longer have his own standalone earnings calls.
And that's a loss.
I feel like your Woot analogy is spot on. Yeah, I was a huge user of Woot from really early on. And I saw, after the Amazon acquisition, my usage of them from a consumer standpoint slowly dwindled because I could kind of tell, and maybe the average Woot consumer didn't notice as much, but somebody who'd kind of been using the site since it was literally just one single product a day, I think that you're spot on there.
We'll be right back with more on Rocket's big acquisition of Redfin. This GeekWire podcast is brought to you by BECU. Stay tuned as Brian Westbrook interviews BECU's Stacy Black for today's Money Hack about minimizing the impact of uncertain times on your financial health. And for more money hacks, check out geekwire.com/BECU.
How do uncertain times affect your financial health? I'm Brian Westbrook, host of Money Hacks presented by BECU, joined by Stacy Black, lead financial educator for BECU. The world around us is changing, Stacy. What do we do?
Yeah, we need to stay focused on what we can control. It's really volatile right now and there's not a lot we can control. So focus in on what you have control over and look for resources. BECU has great resources for our members, so check with your financial institution and see how they can help. And remember to stay focused on your financial goals. That's why we're going through this work.
We'll have more on this topic, including the latest on student loan forgiveness and what we should do when this topic keeps changing in the world around us. Thank you, Stacy. For more on this topic, visit Money Hacks at geekwire.com/BECU.
Listen to the full interview and find more episodes of Money Hacks at geekwire.com/BECU and find more information at becu.org. Tim, you noticed something in the Rocket news release that I think is worth noting. It said, quote, Rocket expects the combined company to achieve more than $200 million in run rate synergies by 2027, including approximately $140 million in cost synergies from rationalization of duplicative operations and other costs. So clearly there's going to be more layoffs there.
Yeah, I don't know how you get $140 million in quote unquote cost synergies from duplicative operations without laying some folks off. It's really interesting that they literally put that right in their release, while at the same time sort of publicly saying that there weren't going to be layoffs. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Like where does that $140 million come from?
Steph, what does this mean for people in the industry, for home buyers? Obviously, this is part of a larger backdrop, bigger trends in the industry, but what does this signal in your mind or reinforce in terms of those trends?
Without going too far down the rabbit hole, I'll just say that the last couple of years have been industry shaking in terms of the industry's relationship with home buyers and home sellers. There was a major court case that changed the way that agents interact with, in particular, home buyers. They have to spell out how they're going to get paid up front. There are some practice changes in the way that that tours happen and all of that. There's also a brewing controversy over private listings, which is another rising issue in the space, which could affect not just Redfin, not just Zillow. I mean, everyone who offers that home search experience. Is private listings increase, it becomes a diminished experience, right? So there's a lot of things happening right now. The message that you keep hearing in the industry is agents need to be able to express their value. They need to be able to show their worth. And I think if you've bought or sold a home, you probably know what a good agent is. Hopefully you had a good agent and you didn't learn it the hard way. But I think with real estate agents, people tend to feel about real estate agents maybe the way they feel about lawyers. They like theirs. Theirs can get them out of a speeding ticket or worse, but they don't necessarily like them as a group or the sort of the idea of them. I think with real estate agents, there's some struggles there too. Your results can vary sometimes. There's so many wonderful real estate agents. There are also some who are less than wonderful. And that, I think, is the opportunity for the industry and the thing the industry is wrestling with. How do we show up for consumers and continue to prove, which, by the way, real estate has been stubbornly resistant to sort of what I would call the Expedia effect, right? Real estate agents have not gone the way of travel agents. And this is an opportunity for them to continue that run, continue to show their value, and continue to be resourceful and necessary in what's probably the largest, most complex deal, financial move that people will make in their lifetime.
Yeah. Going back to I don't know how many years ago it was, the sort of infamous Glenn Kelman 60 Minutes interview, right? Where he said real estate is by far the most screwed up industry in America, and it's just interesting to see, that was sort of where he was coming from, back in the much, much earlier days of Redfin. And he certainly, I think, toned down that level of rhetoric. But honestly, those big lawsuits that we saw last year and stuff like kind of have proven out that it's still kind of true, really. But it's a tough industry to fight in when you're, the size of Redfin. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe the joining up with Rocket is a path to actually finally try to attack some of that head on. I don't know.
Glenn Kelman on 60 Minutes and the Glenn Kelman of the past, he's not the first person to think that they could come in and fix real estate, right? There have been a lot of smart folks who've come in and thought that they could fix real estate. And most of them have been humbled. And so I think the thing that makes change happen is either something completely new, which, when Zillow started posting, homes with prices on top of them, that vision of turning on the lights and doing all that, that was a complete shift in how real estate information became consumed. But I think scale is what it may take to drive true change in the industry. And boy, oh boy, with this deal, we're talking about another player with scale. And I think it's a better chance to make change than Redfin might have had going it alone.
Really fascinating part of a larger unfolding story in this industry, and really appreciate the insights, both of you. Tim Ellis is a former Redfin market analyst. He's a blogger and podcaster. He's a veteran of startups in Seattle, including Porch, Moz, Glowforge, in addition to Redfin. And Stephanie Reed Simons is Senior Vice President at realestatenews.com. Steph oversees the news team there. And by the way, we should mention, definitely check out realestatenews.com. We partner closely with them. Steph and I and John Cook used to work at the Seattle PI. Lots of deep roots here, even further back than the founding of Redfin. So it's really good to connect with you. Steph, thanks for being on.
Anytime you call me, I will pick up. Thank you so much, Todd. And Tim, it's great to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Tim, thank you for joining. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Next up, Microsoft Copilot meets Xbox. All right, I'm joined now by Thomas Wild, a longtime video game journalist and contributor to GeekWire's gaming coverage, to talk about the latest Copilot from Microsoft popping up in an unexpected place this week. Hey, Thomas, thanks for jumping on.
No problem.
Microsoft this week previewed Copilot for gaming. In my mind, I was thinking like Clippy, but you could see a potential benefit, I guess, for an assistant, an AI assistant in the realm of gaming. Thomas, can you give us a basic sense for what this thing does, at least as Microsoft is describing it?
The way that it was pitched to me at the briefing I attended was that it'll be a little AI buddy that hangs out in your Xbox and keeps track of your friend list and what you've been doing. It'll also pay attention to what games you've been playing and let you know what you were up to the last time you left off. The example they used was somebody playing Age of Empires who hadn't touched it for a while and wanted to know what they'd been doing the last time they'd played. And then that led to some curiosity about the actual historical battle that their current activities in Age of Empires was based on, and their AI buddy was happy to bing that for them. It could also do things like give you some feedback on why you're doing so poorly in Overwatch 2, or download games for you on demand if you wanted to tell it to do something on your behalf, or what should I do first as a first-time Minecraft player was another example they gave. I am very much against AI as a general rule. I think for the most part, it's a series of solutions in search of a problem. And this strikes me as, you're the one who brought up Clippy. Nobody liked Clippy. Every once in a while, I'll find a contrarian who is pro-Clippy for some reason, but I was there when we all used to talk about Clippy like he was the unsung horseman of the apocalypse. All he really did was annoy you while you were trying to do something else. And I don't see anybody chafing at the bit for this kind of functionality to be added to Xbox, especially when it's probably going to be pulling in advice and guide information from the open internet, which means it'll be, taking all of this information from guides that you then don't have to look up yourself and click on. If the Xbox was bigger in the industry, it would be potentially devastating for the entire strategy guide market that makes its way on the internet right now.
Right.
And for that matter, With Xbox rumored to put out a handheld later this year, something to compete with the Switch 2 or the Steam Deck, I can't imagine a version of this where the Copilot program wouldn't just tremendously raise the battery load on whatever device you're using, whether you're using cloud gaming for your tablet or your phone, or whether you're on this ostensible handheld. So really, very much doesn't strike me as something that anybody was really demanding.
Well, I was reading some of the other coverage in addition to your coverage on GeekWire, and the Polygon headline was Microsoft's Copilot for Gaming preview leaves us with more questions than it answers. And the Ars Technica headline was Microsoft's new AI Copilot for Gaming struggles to justify its existence. So it feels like you're not alone in that assessment of this being a solution in search of a problem. But to your point, Thomas, it feels like this kind of functionality and this kind of application of AI isn't necessarily the game changer, if you'll pardon the expression, that some other forms of AI might be. And I admit, on the spectrum of AI adoption, it sounds like you and I might be on opposite ends. But it feels like this is not something that's creating a lot of actual utility in the process, at least as it's been presented.
I could see the value in having a function on the Xbox that actively keeps track of where you were in a game, and if you have to put it down for a couple of weeks, reminding you of what you were up to rather than forcing you to start over so you aren't lost in the shuffle. I think anybody who's played video games with any degree of seriousness seems like the wrong word, but anyone who's actually gotten really into a video game and has then had life pull them away for a week to a month or longer has had that experience where you sit down to finally get back to what you were doing and you realize you have no idea. The idea of having the Xbox keep track of that and let you, giving you a quick story refresher or a point as to the goals you're trying to achieve, or some kind of quick at-a-glance tutorial even, doesn't sound like a bad idea. But at the same time, it also doesn't seem like a problem that is worth solving like this.
It reminds me of something like previously on Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3.
Right.
Yeah.
When you were last playing Modern Warfare 3, you were trying to rank up despite the presence of 3,000 12-year-olds who have nothing to do all day but get really good at this game.
Exactly. So the other thing that this reminded me of, back, I think early in the year, we had Patrick Houston on the show. He's a developer and longtime entrepreneur, and he used to work at Microsoft, and he develops add-ons for Microsoft Office that compete with Microsoft Copilot. And one of his points was, it feels like there have been arbitrary goals and metrics that have been set for Microsoft Teams, not Microsoft Teams, the product, but for teams internally at Microsoft, product groups, to hit specific AI milestones and ship specific AI products. And I looked at this and I was like, man, maybe they shouldn't actually have a mandate to then release those products.
Yeah, it's the same thing you saw with NFTs and the same thing you saw with the blockchain. People trying to wedge this into situations where at best it's a neutral ad, and at worst, you're trying to reduce friction that nobody actually experienced.
Hey, you mentioned the reports and the rumors about Microsoft coming out with a handheld later this year. I would be really interested in getting your take on that. Like, what does that mean? What are the chances of it happening? And what could that mean for the larger market?
It seems like the next console war, so to speak, is going to be in the handheld space between various handheld gaming PCs, the Switch's portable utility. PlayStation is rumored to be going back to that market. And now Microsoft has been getting increasingly credulous rumors that it's got a handheld, at the very least in the prototype stage, if not actually slated for release anytime soon. It would surprise me if it wasn't trying to do something like that, the same way that the living room Xbox is kind of the boutique version of what they're now calling the Xbox experience, a piece of hardware that's built from the ground up to convey that experience in the best way possible, as opposed to the ad hoc version you get if you're using your iPad or what have you. Doing a handheld, which I would imagine would borrow some tech from Microsoft's various tablet efforts to provide you with an on-the-go Xbox experience which matches or exceeds the experience you would get from your tablet or your phone or whatever. It doesn't strike me as a bad idea. I don't know how credulously to take it, because I'd imagine that with a lot of these things, it's an overheard conversation or a misheard bit of executive telephone. But I've heard it a little too often and from too many different sources to completely discount it at this point. I don't know how much it will actually move the needle for Microsoft. I think at this point, because of how they've chosen to approach the Xbox as a part of the larger video game industry, they've kind of doomed themselves to have a substantial, profitable, but distant third place presence in the overall market. They're definitely going to keep up the pace, because at this point they're one of the biggest video game developers in the world. They aren't going to just throw all of that acquisitions money down the drain. But I don't know how much of a value add the portable Xbox actually would be.
This has been a rumor for so many years. I mean, I realize it's resurfaced again, but I think it's been going back for, a decade at least, this whole notion of the Xbox doing some kind of portable.
There was a portable console war, the late 2000s, if I remember correctly, because PlayStation had the PSP, the PlayStation Portable, at that point. And Nintendo was propelled for so long by the overwhelming success of its DS and then the 3DS. And the two of them kind of hashed it out in the marketplace, and Xbox sat back and watched them do it. While the market is probably there, the Steam Deck has been such a big success for Valve that I would be surprised if anybody else wasn't thinking about poking their head into that. It's just hard for me to imagine an Xbox audience that is willing to adopt, yet another platform for the same thing they're already doing. It's possible that there might be some dynamic technical advance which would justify it on their end. But for right now, it seems like they'd be jumping into a flooded market with a proven but not necessarily very popular brand name.
It strikes me that Xbox Game Pass would be a natural bridge between the traditional Xbox console and a handheld, perhaps, where you're able to share the content, have it go back and forth. But it seems like Nintendo has, in many ways with the Switch, already accomplished that by turning the console into a handheld as a second function of it, just by taking it out of the dock. And I wonder if maybe some kind of future hardware innovation for Microsoft might somehow bridge that through the hardware as well, not just through the software.
Well, the way that the PlayStation Portal works for the PlayStation 5 is that it is a screen that you attach to one of your controllers, and you can play your PlayStation library remotely through it, which always struck me as being not really that suitable to my needs in particular, because it's great if you're just out and about in the world, but you're throwing a lot of data back and forth. And what happens if you have to get on a subway train or what have you, someplace where you're going to lose signal? I would want some kind of local applicability for a portable game, or I might as well not have it on me.
Right. And then it also gets into the issue of data plans and Wi-Fi and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the big thing about cloud gaming in particular, which has always struck me as being kind of too early to the market, is that in a country like South Korea, which has incredible consumer internet and people don't stay home that often, cloud gaming strikes me as a much better solution to someplace like here, where only the biggest tech hubs in the country really have the high-speed internet that would make a cloud solution worthwhile. And if you're in one of those hubs in the first place, then you've probably got enough living quarters at home that you're just going to wait until you get home to play your games.
Well, this is great. Thanks for the quick catch up on this stuff. Hey, I was listening to the official Xbox podcast, and I liked one of the questions they asked at the beginning. So I want to ask you, Thomas, what are you playing these days?
Well, I do a weekly column on Hard Drive, the satire site, where I cover a new independently made game every week.
Yeah.
So most weeks I'm playing something for that, and I just wrapped up a column on this indie game called Memory Lost, which is what they call a twin stick shooter, where you maneuver with one stick and you aim with the other. And it's all about body swapping to your enemies. So you can take control of any enemy in the room and use their weapons and take advantage of their new position. And you're supposed to just flip around as quickly as you can.
Huh.
In my spare time, I've been occasionally poking at another one called Scald, which is an old-fashioned turn-based strategy game.
Uh-huh.
And just in terms of gaming in general, I got back into Dungeons and Dragons not too long ago, and I've been running a campaign of that.
Well, this is great. I'll link to your columns on the Minus World imprint on hard drive, and I know folks would want to follow you there. Where can they follow you elsewhere, Thomas?
Well, I'm off Twitter. I couldn't put up with that crap any longer.
You and millions others.
I'm mostly on Blue Sky right now. Just search for my name. You'll find me.
Thomas Wild, thank you very much. Appreciate you jumping on and giving us a quick update here.
Thanks, Todd Bishop.
Thanks for listening. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop. Hope to see you Thursday at Town Hall Seattle for Microsoft at 50. And we'll be back next week with a new episode of the GeekWire podcast.